we feel that the consumer is a really important and sometimes forgotten part of this technological development that's happening within our industry. And also, when the consumer's involved, there's also an impact on brands. So I just want to share a couple of thoughts about what this changing market means for brands and what it means in the eyes of consumers. So I guess to start off with, I think we all know who this guy is. So Tim Cook said earlier on this year that there's a major disruption looming in the automotive industry. And he was talking about 3 vectors of change happening. So 3 things that are sort of happening independently: autonomous vehicles, electrification, and development of services, that at some point in the near future, at a time to be debated, are going to come together and create a huge disruption in the industry. And so that timing is a thing that is changing and depends on who you ask. But it's certainly something that's coming and is coming down the line. Looking at how an industry can develop technologically and how often it takes a while for the technical aspect and the product aspect to develop before we get mass adoption. So this is looking at the development of the internet and the Internet of Things, a number of devices connected to the internet over a period of time. And you can see that there was a large period of time where there was a technological development of the internet, making it work in a way that's actually useful for people. So things like emails and websites building and browsers that actually operate. But there was sort of a tipping point around the turn of the century where actually there was starting to be some services built that were useful to consumers. And again, I don't need to go into all of the things that we all use today. I think probably have 3 connected devices on me at the moment, a phone and watch and other things. So I think we all know sort of the direction that's going. But it took a while to get going. It had to have the technological pieces together, then it needed some people to develop some products on it, and then actually consumers went, hey, this is a much better thing for me to use than what I'm doing currently. Digitization of the market of the world is speeding up the adoption. Looking at 75 years it took to get 50 million users of the telephone. It took 35 days to get 50 million users of Angry Birds. So the digitalization that we have today means that adoption of things can be so much quicker than they were before, because there's not those sort of physical boundaries of having to put physical telephones in places and connect them with wires. We can turn on an app and everyone goes, oh, this is fantastic, and everyone's got it on their phones within 35 days. So the speed of adoption is going to be a lot quicker, and that opportunity is really exciting. So where are we today in that journey? So this is just looking at the 3 areas that Tim Cook was talking about. So electrification, autonomous, and services. And just looking at the times that things have come in and the general timeline. So the first hybrid car in the US was in 1970. The first car fitted with cruise control was 2 years before that. So a long, long time ago. But it took till 1997 for the Toyota Prius to be launched. So a huge gap where nothing really happened. But then almost another 10 years before we had the first Tesla. But then 2009, 2010, we've suddenly got Nissan Leaf and all of those other things. And within the last 7 years, we've now got a huge market of electric and hybrid vehicles. The same when it comes to driverless. 2010 was Google's first launch of their, look at our autonomous driving pod, and all of a sudden now we're up to many, many million autonomous miles and all of this technology that Ben was talking about. And then the services, as I mentioned earlier, tend to come a little bit later. So 2000, Zipcar launched, but really it's just an alternative rental company. They weren't really in the same sort of car sharing guise as they are today. And it wasn't until 2010 that we had an Uber beta. So you can see the services following that sort of similar pattern. But just to show the pace of change, these are just the things that have happened in the last month. So in the last 23 days. So Waymo have launched their driverless taxi service, which Ben mentioned. First on-road tests of autonomous vehicles in Coventry, which started last week. Uber agreeing to buy 24,000 autonomous vehicles. Tesla's new vehicle launched last week in the electric space. Huge announcements of investment from Daimler and VW in electric and autonomous. And massive investment in the likes of Uber and Lyft's development outside of the US. So these are things that have happened in the last 20-odd days, and I think we're all aware of some of the stuff that was in the budget yesterday and how that's going to impact things as well, and that probably warranted its own slide here to talk about. But certainly the government saying that they want to have the UK ready for autonomous vehicles by 2021 is bold and possibly a bit of clickbait, if there's such a thing in politics, but it's certainly a clear statement about how quickly things are going to move. So the question remains really about, and maybe it's one for the panel session in a minute, to talk about when this mass adoption is going to happen. So from a technological point of view, things are in reasonable shape. We've got autonomous cars that work, we've got electric cars that work, we've got services. They're not all quite connected together yet, but they're sort of there. So it's a case of how quickly are those going to come together, and then how quickly are consumers going to buy into that process. And I say it's a great debate to have about what that time frame is. I suppose from our perspective, when we wrote the white paper, started writing it this time last year, I was convinced there was going to be 10, 15 years this was going to come to fruition. I had lots of debates with people about it. And actually standing here a year later, I feel it's going to be even quicker, because just the pace of change and the pace of pretty much every day there's an announcement about something in this space, it's coming really, really fast. We saw within Mark and Karen's presentation, 1 in 3 people would consider replacing their standard form of transport with an autonomous vehicle. So already consumers are starting to make that shift, but again, they're a bit behind all of the technology because these things aren't coming together properly for us. So what does this mean for automotive brands? Well, really, we need to look at kind of how this has happened in other industries before. So one of our favourite parallels, how relevant is a DVD and video rental business when you're able to get all of your TV, video directly into the back of your television. I was thinking about it this morning, having to remember to take videos back. Is this a 3-day rental or a 1-day rental? What do I have to do? Now Netflix is there, and I switched it on last night and watched something. And that's something that happens very, very quickly. And the brand Blockbuster in lots of countries doing lots of things can suddenly become really irrelevant to a customer when a different service comes in place. So the question remains about how relevant is a motor insurance provider when people don't need motor insurance anymore? How relevant is an automotive financial services provider when people don't need to buy and own their cars anymore? So we have to think about how those brands stay relevant in this change in this consumer market. The good news is, actually the established brands have a head start. Nobody's better placed for this. There's already a customer base, there's already brand equity, there's already established infrastructure. So if Blockbuster were at the equivalent of this event 10 years ago or 12 years ago, they may well have gone, okay, right, there might be an opportunity here to do an on-demand TV service. If they did, would they have beaten Netflix to it? Maybe, they already had that in place. But they either didn't see it coming, or in the case of some of the camera operators and things, saw it coming and ignored it, actually then they got taken out of the market. Also, from a brand perspective, this doesn't just apply to autonomous future, so it doesn't apply to a mobility on demand, mobility as a service type future. Actually today, buying and owning a car is really difficult. And I know for 15 years of working for OEMs and having a new car every 3 months, I didn't realise how hard it was to buy a car. I joined Clarity, had to go to a dealer and went, this is a bloody nightmare. And actually recently replaced my car this year and it was even more difficult. So there's a real sort of challenge around this market already. Digitisation is creating sort of perceptions for customers and expectations that I'm not sure as an industry we're able to meet, and that's going to give us even bigger challenges when the market starts to change. We've already seen the likes of CarWow come in and start to provide removing friction from part of the process, and all of a sudden they have more website hits than most of the car manufacturers in a very, very short space of time, and actually doing something very simple and creating an extra layer in the process, but it's taking some of that pain away for customers. So how do brands stay relevant though? So a couple of things that I want to touch on, and things that we can sort of do to positively impact this area. The first thing to do is to look at products. So look at the products that we're offering our customers today and ask ourselves a question of whether they're the best products for our customers. So not whether they're the best products that we can offer given our technical constraints, not the best products that better than our competitors or better than we offered last year, but actually better in the minds of our customer. Because today in a digital world, customers have an expectation set by possibility. So when they can have all of their TV streamed directly into the back of the actual TV itself, there's an expectation of that speed and that frictionless service. When you can set up a bank account through an app on your phone by scanning your driving license to validate your ID and have an account set up in 5 minutes, people then find it confusing as to why they have to go to a dealership to apply for finance. So we have to think about these markets and the customer's expectations set by the possibilities that the digital world creates. And actually, one of the things that we always advocate, and why we have such a close relationship with the guys at BDRC, talk to your customers, find out what they think about your products, find out how relevant they are to what they're doing, how it works with them day to day. We know we've been out and spoken to people recently about how people feel about buying a car, and they don't like it. They don't like interacting with dealers. They find it clunky and difficult. Go and have those conversations with customers and ask them what they want. Ask them what they want and they'll tell you. There's always the famous Henry Ford adage of if you ask people what they want, they'll say a faster horse. So challenge them as well. Say, oh, well, if we gave you this packaged in this way, what do you think? Oh, you wouldn't like it? Okay, well, what if we packaged it in this way? Oh, okay, I'd never thought about that, but that would be really good. And it's a really, really interesting thing to do, to go and talk to customers and challenge them to see what they want and how they want to interact with your products. The other element is not being afraid of data. Data is such an important part of what we do, particularly in the marketing area, but often we get afraid of it.
most of you who know me and have talked about this subject with me know my disdain for the big data, because it just gets used almost as a bit of an excuse for not, oh, it's big data, oh, no, I'm scared of it. Data's just data, and data's only valuable if you do something with it, if you try and gauge some kind of insight from it and try and use it to better what you're doing. So in the same way as talking to customers and asking them what they want, look at the data to see if it can support what you do. But if you look in the data looking for the answer, looking for some kind of silver bullet, it won't be there. You'll get lost in big data. You'll be doing big data forever and a day, and you'll find there's no answers at the end of that tunnel, because data is only there to support what your customers are saying and what the market is doing. And finally, don't be constrained by heritage. We've got some fantastic automotive brands represented here in this room today, and customers feel really connected to automotive brands that have been around for a long time. But don't let your heritage be an excuse for not being able to give that best service. You know, the amount of times we hear, well, we can't do that because this system won't talk to this system. Yeah, okay, but the customer doesn't know that and actually doesn't care. And we have to think about what the customer wants, and they aren't going to accept if this process isn't going to be able to come together because there's some challenges in the background. They're just going to go, well, someone else over here can do it quicker. CarWow can make this process easier for me, so I'll just go to them instead of going to a dealer. So heritage is such an important thing, but don't be constrained by it. But for me, and the whole reason for having this event, and the most exciting thing about this event today, is about the opportunity that we've got as an industry and as a group of people in this room to create new and expand our propositions to customers. Helping them to connect to our brands in new and different ways, but also to define the transportation world for the next century. There's a huge amount of change, and we've got the opportunity to define it and to actually set out what that is. And that for me is an exciting thing. That's why I get up every day. That's why the team come into work and the things that we strive to do. And it's such an exciting time, and I think we're all here to discuss it, and let's have more conversation. That's me. Just for the guys as well, you can find my desk at Shorthand Spinner Stamp. I can guarantee there's probably only a few people who know what that is in this room, but those of you who don't will know by the end of the day, and you can put that into the What 3 Words app and come and find my desk. So I look forward to seeing you there. And that's me. Thanks.